Once you get money, you become a much more serious, potentially dangerous person. The poor man doesn't know enough. The poor man don't know enough to be dangerous. The poor man don't even know enough to be serious enough about keeping it. But if you're born into it, and you've had just a taste of what it is not to have it, yeah. So now I'm a much more sinister man than my father. Much.
Oh, really?
And I'm definitely much more. I'm a very peace loving man, but my father's a much bigger hurt than me.
You guys aren't street people because you didn't hang out at the liquor store. Your dad had a job. Your mother wasn't, playing bid whist and yelling, and you weren't the people outside at night in the streets, never worse. What was the difference between those of you that ran the streets, the families that ran the streets, versus people outside populating the streets? And did that set you up for success in dealing with it?
Well, until you brought your perspective of what it was, the definition of a street person, and your definition was a very direct definition. Street person meaning people who spend their time outside wandering the streets. I lived in my own little bubble of generational people and organized crime. So when I would say he in the streets, that meant not only is he involved at a level of criminality, but he's involved in a somewhat high level of criminality. Because he'd be like, he getting money in the streets.
But that don't mean you hang out at the liquor store.
No, just the opposite.
Just the opposite.
The people who, now when I say the people who I was saying, or that we would say in our little bubble, they in the streets, those are the people that you would never see on the streets. Or every blue moon they visited the streets that they ran. And now they worked, their business took place on the streets, they controlled the streets, but you wasn't gonna physically catch them on the street. In fact, that was the whole thing, was to move up very quickly so you wouldn't be on the streets.
It truly was, especially before just before television everywhere. I remember being in jail in the 90s, and like a big story would be like, oh, once the Chambers brothers drove down our street and everyone came outside. Like, that was the best anecdote that he had to tell of his whole life.
Yeah, we, as I say, that we're kind of upper management or ownership of the organized crime little divisions, the family affairs that was going on. When we would actually be on the street, that was for like morale, or occasionally just to check on your business, make sure things is running smooth, and like that was. But the people who was living on the streets of that bottom of the end, kind of the lower part of that urban existence, like anything, you know it, but you're not really involved in it, right? And you know all of the social ills and traps and tragedies that are occurring on that level of the street life. So you know not to be around it. Because you always know that tragedy is always gonna happen on the block. So you can't be on the block too often. Unless you got some kind of internal business issue that demands the upper management or ownership be on location for a minute to straighten out whatever kind of street beef is going on, or why the bad money ain't, why we went from doing $20,000 a day to doing $1,000 a day, and you're like, something wrong. I need to send myself or upper management to the block to figure out what's going on with you people.
So now, as a 50-some-year-old man with experience, and you're not in it anymore, and looking back, what would you say to someone who says, well, if your families didn't let themselves or their kids be out in these environments, and you knew, oh, we can't be out, like you said, tragedy is happening all the time, what would you say to somebody who said, well, you're the predators?
I mean, I would say that I'm not that I can give you two answers. You want the political correct
I
one?
want Wallace.
So the political correct one will go something like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, and we meet people and bad people, and we preyed upon people who've got afflictions and addictions and suffer from dysfunction." That's the bullshit. We come from the same environments that some silly people suggest we destroy. We're the products of those neighborhoods. Our families, myself included, have suffered from drug addiction, active addictions. We've lost family members to the streets via murder and mayhem. The same people that you call me and my ilk, the predators, we're the same. We are the real people who this shit is happening to. My family and a few of our associates, the cliques, were the survivors that were able to elevate to be able to escape all the murder and mayhem. And then we got a taste of what the middle class of America and the entrepreneurial class of America was living like. And lo and behold, we figured out once you get enough capital, you can actually set yourself up to where you don't have to live and worry about the murder and mayhem that's been plaguing us and people like us for generations. So my answer is say that we were a predator. I mean, I don't know how you can be a predator when it's the jungle. There is a hierarchy in the jungle. In a capitalist society, there's got to be a consumer and there's got to be a producer. So if we African Americans, Hispanic Americans, or white working class people who took a shot in the streets, doing some things outside the justifications of the law, so that we could escape the murder and mayhem that we're being accused of causing. It was our reality. There's a line in The Godfather 3, the Michael Corleone character. He says, "I did the things I did so my family would never have to know the horrors of the world." If you know what really can happen to you in certain environments, you spent enough time in the projects, you come from where we come from, and you know that what poverty and desperation can do to a person, you'll move heaven and earth to separate yourself from that situation. So I'm not the one to make any apologies.
Okay. Bridging on from that sounds good. But as you've told us, your particular family didn't enter any serious crime until your father was 30 years old. He had a stable job. You already had made it out to projects. Father was not somebody that had even steamed drugs. What to this day doesn't even have a drink.
Correct.
So you guys are already out of the jungle. Now the jungle was nearby, you weren't that far, but in the jungle, you had made what for most people was, of the American dreams, there'd be a home on it. Now, let me add a part two of that to give you maybe a lot to think about, but as we also know, studies of CEOs show that, 1% of U.S. population is a sociopath. Most CEOs of Fortune 500 companies are high on a sociopath. Do you feel, because your father's so interesting, that it's so different from almost anyone else of entering, he wasn't someone that was in a gang when he was young. There was none of that.
Square.
That's right. You were out of the jungle itself and had some degree of comfort and safety, or living in a good neighborhood of Detroit at the time. He had a good job. Do you think your father, and maybe even you, was somewhere on the sociopathy scale? And the CEO says, your father's not a mean, evil person. He's a great family man, but...
Okay, so I'll justify Pop's situation. Pops knew poverty as a child growing up.
And real race.
And real race. Segregation, so... And when he hooked up with Eddie, his intention was not to become a kingpin or to have international drugs.
What do you think they thought it just happened? Is that what happens in the drug business that a lot of people get big? Where oh, I'm just trying to make 100,000, and then it just
No one, like, no one, maybe out the bar, Eddie Jackson, even had the wildest fantasy that they're going to be living in the suburbs and they'll be traveling the world and there'll be diamonds and furs. They were broke. You know, Eddie couldn't pay my dad back a $50 loan. When my dad goes to collect a $50 loan from Eddie, 6 months to pass, and Eddie's driving Cadillacs, and the ascent has come. So, if we want, I never would put myself in their situations for the things I did. First of all, the majority of my criminality, my person was in service of my father and his situation. I was involved in these activities as service of my father at his bequest and at his pleasure. And when he was displeased with me, I get fired. Then he'd get back pleased with me and I get rehired. But so I say that to say, on that what's the word you use?
socioeconomic.
No,
Sociopathy.
social apathy. Again, this may not be commonly said. Once you get money, you become a much more serious, potentially dangerous person. The poor man doesn't know enough. The poor man don't know enough to be dangerous. The poor man don't even know enough to be serious enough about keeping it. But if you're born into it, and you've had just a taste of what it is not to have it, yeah. So now I'm a much more sinister man than my father. Much.
Oh, really?
And I'm definitely I'm a very peace-loving man. My father's much bigger heart than me.
So you use the word sinister, and we won't get too much in that, but I mean, that's a strong word. Do you mean by that, like, it's very easy for you to say, well, this human being ain't part of me or my whatever, so whatever happens? Or I don't need to help them, or what does that mean without being too specific?
So he could fathom not having things he's grown accustomed to much easier than I could. So what I might, in different time, things that I might have been more comfortable with doing to make sure that our situation is protected, he might not have that. But again, he raised me right, but it's just, I don't think I'm not unique like that. I think the second generations of anybody comes from, you see the world different. And I mean, again, I'm just gonna put it out there. Because poor people are naive. That's half the reason why they stay poor. It's because they deal in these good, bad, evil, good, shit, do. Well, when you've been exposed to the world, when you come from resources, you understand there is no good people, there are no bad people. We're just people. And people do things. And that the rich and the powerful don't have time for words like pity, mercy, fairness. Those are illusions they give the poor to keep the poor. It doesn't exist. So people, the longer a person has been exposed to poverty and all of those malfeasance of thinkings that they feed the poor to keep the poor, the rich will do whatever. And then once you realize that once we get a couple hairs, that ain't even no money. It was only money because we used to not be able to pay rent. We used to be catching a bus, so if mom and daddy was catching the bus and coming up on mama and was coming up in the projects waiting for their uncles to give them 25 cents so they could have lunch, their idea, of making it is like you said, shit, you're Mark Twain and you was the cashier at the grocery store, your husband the bus driver, you made it. Well, if you grow up because of them, grow up the way I grew up, bus driver lifestyle and cashier at the grocery store, that ain't gonna do it. I wasn't put here to live like that. Now, see, I just say it, and it's okay when people who don't have the melon that I have say these things all the time. I wouldn't put on this earth to live like that. And I gotta be broke. And I hear people say that, well, they should stop doing that. There are some people who've already made the decision a long time ago. If it's a choice between freedom and poverty, I'll take my chances with losing my freedom. But what I ain't gonna do is be Paul. What I ain't gonna do is let other people dictating the futures of myself and my family. And Mr. Illuminati, also what I ain't gonna do, Mr. Illuminati, is getting you good white folks who run this world's business. And I'm gonna stay my ass on 7 Mile and get all this bigger money and leave you people alone.
African American.
African American white. Yeah. And I appreciate the good education that y'all allowed me to attain, Mr. Illuminati. And I'm not gonna do too much more talking to try to enlighten these poor folks on how y'all run y'all system. Because I talked too much already, Mr. Illuminati, by explaining to these poor people that the reason why they poor is because they ain't thinking about getting no money.
We had talked before, and a good point you have brought up, going back to what you said, was you as a child listening to your mother and your father talk about the television interview and your views on everybody when that happened.
So right,
okay. Yeah.
So I'm 10 years old. Ron's about 10 years old. Pops and Eddie have been all on the newspaper.
Rutherford Library holders.
Right. And Ross Black, Milton Henry, Shelley Harpin, the legal team thought that it was best to counteract all the media attention that they were getting, because the feds had leaked the case to the media to basically attempt to try the case in the media, make it so they wouldn't be able to get a fair jury trial and make them have to take a bench trial. So anyway, Eddie and Pops decided they're going to do these interviews with Bill Bonds and Bob Bennett and Ward Hume and all on the anchors of the day. So I hear my mom and dad, because Daddy's asking Mom, well, they want to shoot one of the interviews at Eddie's house. And obviously, I grew up next to Eddie Jackson. Or they're going to shoot one of the interviews at Eddie's house. They want to shoot the other interview at our house. And my mother's like, I'm not letting them people in my house. And my dad's like, Teresa, why are you being like that? She's like, I'm not going to participate in this circus. Why are you even getting on TV? And Dad's like, because they're saying we sell dope. And she's like, but you do sell dope. But he's like, but they're lying. And she's like, yeah, they're lying. And he's like, and the government is lying and about how we sell dope, or the details of how we sell dope. And the newspapers are saying that we got attack dogs and we live in this mafia compound. These dogs we had running around they were far from attack animals. The fact that, we had some, at the time, Gunther state-of-the-art security, that was true. But we weren't living in this mafia fortress that the way the newspapers were depicting it. And I just remember thinking to myself at 10 years old, Daddy lies, the lawyers lied, the TV people lied, and the government lied.
Everybody but your mother.
Everybody lies.
And even for her, she was still accepting the life, so it wasn't like she left.
So at a very early age, that
it was more of a band. It wasn't a quest for the truth. It was a fight for whose truth was going to win.
People do self-serving thing. The newspapers, at 10 years old, I was able to come. The newspaper just want to sell newspapers. The TV people just want people to watch TV. The lawyers get paid to put Daddy in jail. Daddy paid the lawyers not to go to jail. And everybody's in it just because everybody's just doing what they do, because in the end, everybody just want money. As a kid, you grew up the way I grew up. Everybody's saying that the dope man is bad, but yet Daddy and Eddie and their friends are always the most admired people every place we go. So they keep telling me that the drug dealer is bad when I read the newspaper, but my real life experience is showing me that everywhere I go, these are the most admired people around, that everybody wants to be near them, that everybody comes to these same people where they're saying are the bad guys, but when regular people need help.
I'm telling how much of that one?
It's sad. My father is giving away my father's giving away over $1 million in charity.
Just
family and friends over the course of his career.
And Eddie even went
on the streets. Eddie untold.
Well, your father had more time to do it, but
but right.
they both did.
But both of them individually over $1 million. The part that again doesn't get spoke about. Unlike Chase Bank and NBD, when you borrow money from my father to send your kid to school, you don't get a student loan letter with interest talking about you need to pay me back for that money. Those guys, I know I'm talking about an era and day long gone by. Those guys saw it as their responsibility because, again, they from that same community that people say they're preying on. Those are their friends. Those are the people they grew up with. That's the people who their sisters married. Those are the people that their brothers married.
Talking about the drug users?
The drug users are that general community in general. So when you need, when your granddaughter call you and say the people at the bursar's office said if tuition ain't paid by next week, you can't attend school no more. And something about a bunch of details that Pop and the Eddies of the world didn't care about, the Pell Grant didn't go through, or the loan papers wasn't right, where they say Daddy's a bound man, so he made $10 more than he was supposed to for me to qualify for financial aid. And now either I have to leave Michigan State and go to Wayne County or I got to pay out of pocket. Well, you know who you go to in the reality in our community? You go to that dope man who you know either direct there, and it doesn't have to be directly. You could be my wife's sister's friend's cousin who work in Michigan Bell. And you know that my friend Senator Sandra, God rest her, Sandra's sister is married to the big dope man. And he got money like that. And if I tell Sandra the plight that I'm in, she'll go to her sister, and her sister will tell her husband, you know, some good people down there to work with Sandra, and they got the situation. And guys like Papa say, well, he gonna not be really care because you already know it's a charity situation. Well, how much you need so the kid can stay, so the girl can stay in school? She need $8,000. Don't come get it.
Oh, so pretty large amounts of money, not just $300.
No. That I ain't even counting those. I ain't counting the under $1,000. Because when you was getting money the way that at different periods, when, as the kids say nowadays, when we were up, when they know we up, I put give that away every day. I'm gonna give away $300 every day just leaving the house. What do you do? Because see, that's the part where I get irritated. Predator. I go on the block to give away money. Pop them would go places with the intentions that we gonna spread out some of this money. Because why? Because the niggas need money.
So you guys, okay, they were doing their thing in the 70s.
Yeah.
Then you began helping your father in the 80s, cocaine, and then again, you guys heroin in the 90s. When did there become I mean, at the time, you probably weren't thinking about it because you were caught at it, but looking back, when was there a change in the nature of how the drug dealer in the black community went from that to maybe becoming more purely or do you think it changed or?
Well, yeah, we had some time to think about it, and shout out to the brother Kafario brought it up. My pops and them, and then people my age, we were the last generation on the African American community period to be raised by Jim Crow people. People my age, all the people who raised us were products of segregation in Jim Crow. So that sense of us against them, that sense of we got, they lived it, they passed that on to us. That, you heard the stories. My parents, I used to leave the plush comforts of the suburbs to be dropped off at the King Homes or the Jeffrey Projects because they just felt it important that I know that this wealth we got now, these people out here ain't who we are. The people in the Brewsters and the Jeffreys eat King Homes. That's who we are. We just didn't hit a lick. But don't get confused. That's who we are. That's where we come from.
And that's who you should be concerned about.
That's who you should be concerned. Because in the end, if this all falls apart,
that's where you don't go.
Guess where we go. So I think people, my generation, so after that, anybody younger than me or that came up that were not influenced by people who lived that Jim Crow segregation, that sense of community, that sense of, which ain't an accident why in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 20s, the number mans funded all of the businesses in the black community in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Still the main funding source for black entrepreneurship, but these on a small time level, mom and pop shops, was coming out of the narcotics trade because that's what it was. So I would say late 80s. I think the crack epidemic.
Was it the drug or was it the generation?
Both. I think it was the double whammy. Because if you're 20 in 1987,
You're right.
your mama was born in what, 67 then?
Well, no, you were born in 60s.
I'm saying if you were 20 years old, right?
In 87, you were born in 60s.
See what I'm saying? You missed that.
You grew up in the 70s.
He grew up in the 70s. You grew up not.
It was affirmative action. It was just a different
It
world.
was just a different world.
Still had problems, but
I think my generation is the last generation that quote unquote that character in the black community known as Big Mama. Those grandmothers and great grandmothers that was always, regardless of whose family it was, because when you have Big Mama house, there is no hierarchy. Whether you the son who's the big dope man or you the son that's the dope fiend. At Big Mama house, y'all are just Big Mama's son. It don't map. There ain't no class structures there, right? So later, as those kind of as our community became more fragmented, and we was one of the first black families, Black Flag, right? That got some money and got out of Detroit and moved to the suburbs. But 10 years, 15 years later, it just, So I think the crack epidemic and I think just the change in black culture. And I'm not going to be a hypocrite and say those people who were selling drugs in the community were parasites, because nobody would sell drugs if people didn't buy them. There is no drug business without the consumer wanting to use them. Now, why people want to use drugs, that's a whole nother project. No one sells drugs if those people wanted to buy them.
do drug dealers make the neighborhood dangerous, or you just go to dangerous neighborhoods to sell drugs?
Poverty makes neighborhoods dangerous.
Talk about the fact that though, for those not from this environment, you trained to think, oh, a drug-related murder in L.A., they call everything gang-related. But really, people, we grew up in Detroit, we're just violent, and it's whether we're selling drugs or not. Like, not that many murders are actually drug-related. I mean, some are, but...
You know, the powers that be, for their political measures, like to associate drug use. I sold my individual little side hustles. It amazed me when I started working for my father about poor people even getting high. All the drugs we were selling were to wealthy people who like to sniff cocaine and pay high prices for it. And there's a whole economy. You know, one rich man can buy more cocaine than 10,000 crackheads. Okay? One rich man's habit is half the people on Mac and Newick's habit. They just don't have them. It's just simple math. Your income is $15,000 a year, and then you do another stealing and scamming to come up with another $15,000. So, okay, your gross potential to spend on drugs in that year is $30,000. That's a rich man's weekend getting high. So drugs are not why communities are violent. Communities are violent because there's poverty. How do we know that? Because violence has always been, violence is a product of income, not of drug consumption. Because I saw a lot of drugs, have been a lot of places with wealthy people who do a lot of drugs, and there was no violence. So it can't be the drugs.
Going back to the change in community, what were some of your parents' first dates as far as with them going to black themed about?
So I speed that Her and Pops in their day, so they're dating in the mid-60s.
And they're high school sweethearts, right?
Yeah, or right after high school. Well, yeah, high school, yeah, because my mom and my sister when she was 18, so that sounds crazy in today's world, but that was actually pretty normal and standard.
You said 60 or 80?
18. 18. Because she was 21 when she had me. They would go see people like H. Rap Brown, famous Black Panther orator, Huey Newton.
On a date.
That was like what you did for your date. It's like
And they were, I mean, that's what a young
a lot
black
of black couples. That's just what you did. Like one of her fondest memories of is like what she tells me in the main met. The recently transferred for Cassius Clay to Muhammad Ali right there on Linwood at Mosque number 1. And how nice he was, and he was just shaking hands with everybody. That being involved, as I say, you know, in our house on Mark Twain, we had pictures of Angela Davis, the Black Power side. I was one of those kids getting what they called the blowout, where you make your fro big. You know, I had upteen numbers of red, black, and green Afro picks.
The black church.
We were wearing, my mother was buying me dashikis when I was 7 years old. So they were very much into that whole.
And what, in 36 to 48 months, the whole, it wasn't just your family, the whole culture of America changed, especially black America, like, right? I mean, they're going to see Huey Newton and buying their son dashikis. 36 months later, you wearing whatever fancy clothes, and he's a heroin king, or he's involved with a heroin king, right? 4 years, maybe?
The realities of it.
So that's I'm just saying society's always changed, but I'm saying that's an amazingly, that little period of time, America changed so much from maybe what, when did the Black Tower era last? Maybe 67 or 8?
I can say even so in 1972, I'm 6. I was born in 64. So I'm really 8 and beginning 65. So I'm 7 or 8, 7 years old. That was still a thing.
But it was a style more so than a lifestyle.
I would say by 76, it was a whole different. People just weren't talking about it. Even as a kid, you just did see the red, black, the green picks that went away. The wearing, the buying, the dashikis it went away. My mom, well, she was an afro now, but
A natural.
a natural. You know, my mom always wore afros, and still did all through the transition from the 60s all the way now. But her friends, when I was a kid, all the black women wore afros or naturals. That started to go away. And whether you are, to be after that, whether you're in banking or selling bundles, it's easier to be radical when they got no money.
Speaking of which, discuss your perception of, at that very same time, political change, Richard Nixon coming in, the riots have happened in a lot of cities. Nixon at least pays lip service, whether you put money into it or not. It's complicated to figure out, promoting black capitalism, small business ownership. What was that some sort of plan? And specifically talking about Judge Spiken and how they treated him.
Right.
Do you remember when Nixon was away? Or 68?
I remember what started me to being interested in politics was the Watergate hearings. Because
That was what, 74?
right. So as a little boy, a form of torture would be the women would make me sit and watch stuff that they called the stories. That's a form of torture for a 9-year-old boy, to be forced to sit.
Not these days. They like it's not.
To have to watch the stories was a form of torture. So when this thing called the Watergate hearing started, the stories went away and they would cover the Watergate hearings. And my mind was so desperate for anything But watching the stories, I started watching the Want to Get hearings. And I became interested in politics and history. My dad was a history buff anyway, but I started to follow into the whole thing with the president might go to jail and all of that. So later I find out, and obviously in the backdrop, going to school, that the Nixon administration, they were smart. So you asking about how do you make people who are rioting in 67, a group of people who are rioting and seem to be fed up with the status quo and system, how do you make them not start tearing up things? There's a term in philosophy called elite recruitment, which is when you find and identify the best and brightest of, say, a potentially problematic group of people, or that might challenge your status quo situation, lead to elite recruitment. So let's take an example. If you're talking sports, you would very quickly identify Tiger Woods and put him on a fast track, and you make sure that his ability to become a golf, that he's indoctrinated the way you would want him to be indoctrinated, so that the best golfer in the world doesn't end up being a radical. And usually, right? That you find the Condoleezza Rice, the Colin Powell, Susan Rice, and you very quickly you have to identify that these are very, very bright people, and you need to get them involved in your system. You might need to say, and I know this is think tank stuff, kind of stuff that when you're worrying about paying your rent and paying your mortgage, putting gas in your car, you don't have the mental band space to think about these kind of things. That a person like Malcolm X, IIQ, charismatic leadership skills, this person was slipped through the cracks, right? The system was supposed to identify him and put him into a private prep school and get on scholarships.
Well, but that was it. There was no elite recruitment of the blacks yet.
That the Frank Matthews, the Eddie Jacksons, people that out men with innate charisma and leadership skills, you might want to find a path for them. Their path may not to diffuse them. Because you can either have Frank Matthews organizing Black Panther movements, or you can have him organizing international drug transactions. But that man's going to use his IQ and his leadership capacities one way or the other. So if you're the establishment, you can have Milton Henry, Fowler, Tuskegee Airmen, Harvard, Divinity, Yale Law. You can have him using his mental energies and God-given IQ to start the Republic of New Africa, or you can have him using his skills and high IQ to defend Eddie Jackson and Courtney Brown in federal court.
How did that end? But how did everybody?
And not just him. Just think of Kenny Cockrell. Just think of all those black, not just melted, but it's Kenny Cockrell.
Resolve to society. How did everybody change so fast? It's very.
They let the Nixon administration at 68 to 73, 68 to 74, those 6 years of the Nixon administration, he did what he said he was going to do. He empowered African-American men to get a taste of the system. They gave us local jurisdiction, Colin Young at Detroit, Maynard Jackson, Atlanta.
Well, but those were people were like, he didn't give them that.
Environments. Okay. The poor people never make anything happen. Again, that's why they're poor. So when things happen in America, they happen because there are environments or funding mechanisms that lead things to a certain outcome. Rich people don't lead things to happenstance or coincidence. You can't let who's going to run Detroit be left up to the poor people. You're going to give them a choice. And that choice is going to be. So again, I need Coleman Young because Coleman Young could be mayor because he can calm these people down. Having a white mayor and it's counterintuitive. The naive way is black mayor meant power. White mayor means suppression. No. Black mayor means you people calm down. White male means you're going to be hyper aggressive, very quick critiquing of the system. So back to Pop and Eddie and though, I think the Nixon administration. So Judge Fikett was the chief federal judge at the Jackson 32 main conspiracy case. It was appointed to the federal judgeship by Richard Nixon. Literally at the same time that Judge Fikett is being appointed, Richard Nixon is giving these speeches about empowering the black man, giving him his piece of America, that America wants to end all the social tension that the black man has to be given some economic opportunities. If we talk to any black man from the early 70s, it's when a lot of black franchise owners got their first McDonald's franchise, Burger King franchise, car dealerships, the Dick Harris's, Porterfield Wilson's right here in Detroit, Dick Harris' first Cadillac dealer, Porterfield Wilson, Pontiac dealership, on and on and on. The Nixon administration that basically to get a small business, a SBA loan, if you're a black businessman in 72, you just need to have a pulse and a company. The government would give me some money to get off the sea. A lot of the black wealth that got created that exists right now, if you trace it back, it goes back to that Nixon administration, SBA funding, and just a general government atmosphere. They got to stop burning up our major cities. You got to put it in some perspective. There's 72 in Detroit. Just 5 years earlier, you'd have those violent riots in the country's history. We're not going to do that anymore. Right? What is the morale? What does it do for a community when a fat black man is riding in Cadillacs and has so much wealth he could throw money out the window? Does that paint a picture of people that are being oppressed and discriminated against, or does that paint a picture of obviously some black men and women, as the kids would say nowadays, some black men getting some W's, and there was so much street money floating in the African American community in the early 70s in particular. I can go give me a black bandana and a black leather coat and be broke waiting on the Hamilton bus. Or I can get with Marzette or Claxton or Eddie Jackson, and I can be riding me Cadillacs by me Coast men. And that's why I'm voting Republican. I didn't say that. Cut that. Edit. And that's why I was a member of the Young Republican Party again my freshman year at campus. Because taxes are paid.
So would you say you grew up in your young childhood was kind of like a magical Camelot-y type of?
I didn't know it at the time because we were young. But yeah, it was a fantasy, me and Eddie Jr. and his sister, my sister. Now, let me not can be coded. It was a fantasy given the fact that your dad is that you're growing up and that your childhood is tainted with the fact the conversation about your father going to prison is always like the number one conversation of
Oh yeah, so there's a dual thing going on. So your father's died in 71, so that that whole Camelot here is also impending doom.
Right. The backdrop of the best of times is the worst of times because in the end it's Daddy may have to go to jail. LA. Should be on the tape. Oh, yeah. I don't think so. It's Camelot on one hand, and it happened so quick that me and Lou spoke about this. At the same time, we had a maid. At the same time, my mom had a maid. Her mama is working as a maid. Literally at the same time, my grandmother is a maid at the Ben, cleaning lady at the Book Cadillac Hotel. At the same time, my grandmother is getting paid to clean up strangers' rooms. At the same time, that we have hired a senior black woman to clean our home and to cook for me and my sister.
And so your grandmother refused to stop. What was her feeling about it all?
Again, just different time. She liked her job, actually, that they gave her every day. Her and her friends, her coworkers were her friends, right? Working when you don't really need the money is also all different again. People would be amazed how much you might hate a job when you really need that job to pay a bill, as opposed to that job if it's just something to do and to hang out. I've had a lot of jobs. I worked all through my employment, basically, from my father. Working when you don't really need the money is that job's a different job. It could be the same job description, but when it ain't that deep, working ain't that bad when you don't care if he gets right.
Would you call it more of a social interaction? Like
It gives you something to do. Yeah. Like, I mean,
Okay.
no, I was saying, well, I was like, when I was managing the Gap, my last quote-unquote corporate gig in New York, I was district manager for the Gap. And we were right with the Pakistani plug. It already got calmed out. We was skip to, and I was about to go start my entrepreneurial career. But I enjoyed that job. I was in a village in New York, a bunch of other young people. I was learning how to do something. I was learning a skill set. The whatever the $1,000 a week they were paying me, I would blow that money in a night. My paycheck was. People love to be around me on every other Thursdays, because every other Thursdays is when we got paid, and I'd spend my whole check that day. That was like, because it was like free money. It was like I'd even Paul's giving me $20,000 a month allowance, so I just take my paycheck and we go out, and I just do. I couldn't tell my friends, it was Walter and us guys say Thursday, every Thursday was Courtney's boys paycheck day, and I just tell all my friends, let's go out, dinner and drinks on me. So work wasn't bad. I don't mind getting up, and you gotta have something to do with your day.
What was looking back, what was the first time you did something criminal for your father? I mean, even accepting the money in high school, I mean, that's technical, anything that would be under the law, a violation.
I love when I buy my father life as namesake. It's often said I'm not sure who should win the greatest Father of the Year award, or he who has contributed to the delinquency of minor. Well, the first time I broke the law at my father's bequest, I'm in high school. Him and Eddie are doing time together in Miley from the original case in the 70s. And I'm up in Milan visiting him, so I'm like a junior in high school. So I was old enough to drive. I'm 16. Eddie Jr. is 18 months younger than me, so he couldn't drive. And my father says to me, we get up from the table for my mom and sister. We had like the vending machines in the visiting room. And he says, Eddie, baby, the he talking to you, and it's going to need you to do him a favor. I didn't think no more of it, right? And so that next day, so we used to go visit Pops on Sundays. So that next Monday, I catch up with Eddie Jr. And he was like, your Pops talk to you? And I said, yeah. He just said something about Junior's going to ask me to do a favor. And Eddie Jr. went on to explain that his father had asked my father to drive Eddie Jr. up that we were going to do a visit, a 4-man visit. And me and his baby would go visit my pop and his pop. And that we needed to smuggle some marijuana into Milan Federal Prison. And so Eddie put the weed in some balloons. And I drove up there. I knew exactly what was going on. He had the weed on that day. And we had been visiting our fathers in federal prison, so we knew. Make sure you don't have a belt on, no chains, nothing about it. It's a pretty, Milo thing was mid or low level at that point. It's nothing like this thing. Atlanta was a pretty much more security at the airport than there was in Milo as far as going to visit somebody. If you didn't have anything metal, the metal detector wouldn't go off. There's just no reason at all to get searched. So we were very confident that it would be that the point would be the transfer at the point where we have to get to the table and transfer and Eddie Jr. has to actually hand his father the marijuana. and the balloons, which his father would swallow. So there's a whole charade. We had to buy a bunch of potato chips and soda pops to clutter the table, make sure that we're sitting. Anyway, so that was the first thing, actual. Then my father enlisted me to write the novel.
Whereas I'm sure your sister was never worked into much.
No, they were old school, different times.
Would there have been a scenario in which you didn't end up being seriously involved in crime personally?
My mother wanted to send me to military school as soon as Pop hit the leg. Before the Italian Gambino connection. He had moved up
Immediately.
during the Claxton Lake. He really first started working for Eddie, and Eddie gave them.
Because she wanted you to military school, or she wanted you away from?
She wanted me away from my father's environment. I think she could see.
As a boy.
She could see down the road. My mother, she's the hero of the story.
Very intelligent.
She that led the family out of the streets and did some of the right things and put a high value on education. Went back to school herself, was then paved the way. Then became an entrepreneur. So mom was looking, and mom was always the realest. Mom used to always tell my father, "You're going to jail. You're all going to jail. All of my life go on. You know you're going. I don't care what Belton says. I don't care what the lawyers say. You're going to jail." And she would tell him, "You got back out, you got back in the streets, you know you're going back to jail. You and all your friends are going back to jail. Junior, you know your daddy and his friends going back to jail, don't you?" So the Camelot, there's a lot of Camelot. I mean, there was nothing financially that we wanted as a child, as an African-American child in 1973. There was nothing I could not have. I truly didn't know what the word no meant. If I was out and I saw something, I said, "Mom, I want that." I did that. They bought it. We would take a globe and spin the globe. It was a little game me, my sister and mom would play. We had a spinning globe, but we'd take the globe and spin it. And she'd say, "You pick, Courtney." And I'd stop. And wherever the globe stopped, that's where we go.
Where'd y'all go? Say some places you went.
Everywhere. Venezuela, Trinidad and Tobago, Hawaii, Barbados, Paris, France, London.
Didn't you go to Thailand? Or you don't even know. Somewhere with elephants.
Somewhere's Charles, right? Southeast Asia.
With elephants and tigers.
With elephants and tigers. I mean, we used to go to the Bahamas literally like every other weekend, like 2 times a month. Like 2 times a month for years. Mom liked it down there, but my mom liked to have nice there casinos down there. And there was a big actor that Calvin Lockhart.
Oh, yeah.
That she had made friends with the Lockhart family.
Well, yeah, who was he?
Uptown say he was in all those laws. All said cry with Bill Cosby, sick boy. He's from the Bahamas, Calvin Lockhart. She had made friends with them, so I mean, we used to go to Bahamas twice a month. Mexico City, Acapulco. We had family in Florida. It was like, again, the Camelot. I went to Disney World so much as a kid, I used to now go. It seemed almost like a burden. They'd be, "All right, we're going to Florida. We're going to go, again. Disney World again." But on the backdrop of that, there are all those conversations, the other real side of it. You know your daddy's going to jail. And then you turn on the TV and there's people talking about putting your father in jail. And then if you're older, like my sister was, she's getting teased and stuff at school. He fought big dope man.
So that wasn't outside of the, being really an inner city trade where the drug dealer was treated as a hero just because you were black with money. Once in mainstream society, unlike now, there was no, oh, that's cool, or like that was bad to be a drug.
The media said it was bad. Our neighbors didn't care.
Your neighbors didn't care.
Our neighbors didn't care because our neighbors were into other things. Never get my sister run the explanation and the rest of the souls. Chucky Goldfarb who recommended to my parents that they send my sister to Cranbrook where they send their kids to school, private school out Bloomfield Hills. They said, don't worry, send her out to Country Day or Cranbrook where all the other crooks send their kids. That way she won't stand out. You need to go up another level where all the kids' parents are into some shit that nobody really cares. Because the parents...
That was the most expensive.
Yeah. Their parents been in the newspaper for all kind of banking, financial malfeasance, whether it was, just, about the higher up you go in society, the higher up you go, all the honest people are poor. There's a line of with the famous defense attorney says, all my clients are expensive defense attorney. All my clients are guilty because no honest man could afford my rates. Tell me an honest man that can afford $1,000 hour lawyer. How you do that and don't break the law?